Belgium, June 1815. The battlefield smelled of iron and damp earth. Gunpowder clung to the throat like the ashes of an old fire. 3 days had passed since the cannons had gone silent, yet their echo still hung in the air, a ghost of screams that no longer belonged to anyone. Eliza pressed the shawl tighter around her shoulders and forced her legs to keep moving. She pretended to be one of the volunteers searching for the wounded, carrying an empty basket, a mud-stained scarf, and a well-rehearsed lie in case anyone asked what she was doing there. But no one asked. No one looked. The living were too busy trying to forget. She, however, could not forget. Daniel had left weeks earlier with that stubborn smile he always wore when making reckless decisions. "I'll just make sure England stays free, Liza. I'll be back before autumn." But autumn would not wait for him. And deep down, in that quiet corner of the soul where painful truths hide, Eliza knew that if she didn't find him now, she never would. Then she stumbled. Not on a rock or a branch, but on something soft. Human. Her breath caught as she stepped back and saw him, a man lying among the wreckage of splintered wood and twisted metal. His dark blue coat was torn across the back, his hair matted with dried blood, bare feet. The boots had already been taken, likely by looters who passed through before her, still, motionless. Eliza should have walked on. She should have kept searching for Daniel, not waste precious time on a stranger. But then something gleamed between the man's fingers. For an instant, she thought it was a trick of light, until she saw that his hand was clenched, rigid, as if guarding something even in the depths of unconsciousness. Carefully, she brushed away the mud and pried his fingers open. Inside, pressed into his palm, lay a tarnished silver locket, darkened by time, smeared with blood. How had no one seen it? Perhaps the looters had missed its faint glint beneath the grime. Or perhaps he had hidden it there instinctively in the final moment before he fell. Eliza's pulse quickened. The crest engraved upon it, a crown above a rearing lion, looked old, noble, far too noble for an ordinary soldier. She knelt, reached out with a trembling hand and touched his shoulder. He groaned, faint, almost imperceptible, but alive. His fingers twitched, as if grasping for something no longer there. His lips moved soundlessly, and Eliza Hartwell, who had come searching for a brother, found instead a nameless man, barefoot and broken, clutching a secret in his hand and a heart that still refused to stop beating. At 17, she buried her mother. At 20, her father. And now, at 23, Eliza lived alone with her brother on a small estate near the Belgian border, inherited, weathered by time, yet held together by their stubborn will to keep it honorable. The stone house, with its faded blue shutters and the herb garden her mother had once tended, stood proud against the rolling hills. The fields, though modest, yielded enough for them to live without owing anyone a thing. They were not wealthy, but they had dignity. Daniel worked the land while she managed the house, with faithful Martha, the old housekeeper who had served the family since Eliza was a child, and young Thomas, who cared for the horses and heavier chores. Together, the four of them kept the Hartwell legacy alive, a simple life, but one built on love and quiet pride. The neighbors respected them. No pity in their eyes, only the recognition that the Hartwells, though young and alone, knew how to survive with grace. And perhaps that was why, whenever Daniel went away, he always came back. Both loved that land, the gentle slopes, the scent of lavender in summer, the solidity of a house that had seen generations rise and fall. But while Eliza found peace in its silence, Daniel longed for more. He was the kind to laugh too loudly on cold mornings, to bring home stories of London and dreams of a wider world. "You deserve more than this, Liza," he would tell her. "You deserve balls, beautiful gowns, people who see how strong you are," Eliza rarely replied. That life had never dazzled her. The glitter of the court, the perfume of crowded halls, none of it felt real. What held her heart was the smell of wet soil after rain, the distant creak of the mill, the rough texture of the crops she had helped plant with her own hands. It was there, among those hills and quiet rivers, that her heart beat in rhythm with the earth itself. So when Daniel spoke of dresses and dances, she only smiled. That calm, knowing smile that said she had already found her place. He was her dearest brother, the last thread connecting her to their parents, and that was enough. Then war came. And Daniel left. And she remained, but this time it felt different. This time solitude had a name, a face, and the weight of a farewell that might never be undone. That was why she crossed the border 3 days after the battle. Not out of courage, but because waiting for news that might never come was worse than death itself. Yet now, kneeling beside an unconscious stranger, Eliza faced a choice she had not anticipated. Continue searching for Daniel, or try to save a man who might not survive the night. Her mind said one thing, her heart another, and as she looked at the pale, blood-streaked face of the nameless soldier, she realized something that terrified her. She could not leave him behind. Even if it cost her everything. Before we continue this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next tales of love and scandal. Now let's continue with the beautiful story of Eliza and the nameless Duke. Chapter 1. The Stranger Without a Name. The cart rattled violently over the uneven path, and Eliza felt every stone as if it struck her chest. She had laid the man upon an old blanket, his head resting on her travel satchel. He hadn't stirred since she dragged him away from the wreckage, but his breathing, shallow, unsteady, fragile, still carried the stubborn rhythm of life. Every few minutes she glanced down, terrified that if she looked away too long, he might simply vanish into the silence. The sun was sinking when her small stone house appeared at the edge of the horizon. The blue shutters, peeling and weather-worn, still held their quiet charm. Her mother's herb garden, though wild from neglect since Daniel's departure, perfumed the air with lavender and rosemary. Thomas came running from the stables, eyes wide at the sight of the unconscious stranger in the cart. "Miss Eliza, what? Help me," she interrupted quickly, already stepping down. "We must bring him inside, hurry!" The boy didn't hesitate. At 18, Thomas was strong and used to hard work. Together, they carried the stranger through the small stone courtyard toward the front door. Martha stood waiting at the threshold, hands wrung tightly in her apron, her face carved with worry. "Holy Mother above, what have you done?" Her voice trembled between horror and relief. "I thought something had happened to you too." "I found him on the battlefield," Eliza said, breathless. "He was still alive. I couldn't leave him there. And Mr. Daniel." Eliza looked away. "Nothing, I found—" "Nothing." The silence that followed pressed down like fog. Martha's mouth tightened, but she said nothing. She only crossed herself and nodded toward the hallway. "Take him to Mr. Daniel's room. I'll fetch hot water and clean linens." Thomas carried the man. Inside, into the room that had once belonged to Daniel, laying him upon the narrow bed still covered with the wool, blanket Eliza's mother had woven years before. "Who is he, Miss Eliza?" Thomas asked, wiping the sweat from his brow. "A soldier? I don't know." She brushed away the blood-matted hair from the man's forehead. "He was unconscious when I found him. Now, under the golden light filtering through the window, she could see him more clearly. He was handsome, so much so that it unsettled her. Not the soft, boyish kind of beauty she saw in the village, but something sharper. His jaw was strong, his nose straight, his lips well-formed even in pallor. Dark brows arched perfectly, giving him an air almost aristocratic, too refined for a man left to die in the mud. Thomas leaned closer, inspecting the torn coat. "This fabric, it's not from any common soldier's uniform, miss." "I know." Martha returned with a basin of steaming water and a stack of fresh cloths. She set them beside the bed, crossing her arms as her eyes narrowed upon the stranger. "This was in his hand when I found him," Eliza said quietly, opening her palm to reveal the locket. "It looked important." "That's no trinket," Martha muttered. "That's family silver. Noble work. Look at that crest." Eliza turned it over carefully. The metal was cold beneath her fingers. The engraving intricate, A crowned lion, a crossed sword and rose, words in Latin she couldn't read. "Whoever he is," Martha said, lowering her voice, "he's brought trouble to this house." "He was dying, Martha." "And might yet die," the woman replied, soaking a cloth in hot water. "Head wounds are deceitful things. But since you brought him here, we'll see it through. Thomas, fetch more firewood. The night will be cold." "Yes, ma'am." When the boy left, only the two women remained. Eliza dipped the cloth into the basin and began to clean the blood from his face. Her hands trembled, but she forced them to steady. She wiped his brow, his temples, the line of his jaw. "Far too handsome for a common soldier," Martha murmured as she prepared a bandage. "And those hands never held a plow." Then he stirred. A faint sound escaped his throat, half sigh, half pain. Eliza froze. Martha leaned in, holding a candle closer. His eyes opened, blue, strikingly blue, like the summer sky moments before a storm. But empty. Lost. He blinked slowly, breath quickening, and tried to lift his head. "No," Eliza said softly, pressing a gentle hand to his shoulder. "Don't move. You're hurt." He looked at her as though her words were a language he barely remembered. Confusion clouded his face. "Where—" His voice was hoarse, cracking. "Where am I?" "You're safe," she answered, keeping her tone calm despite the racing of her heart. "Far from the battlefield." He frowned, repeating the word as if tasting it. "Battlefield. I was—" The rest faded. His gaze wandered across the room. The low beams, the whitewashed walls, the narrow window glowing with the last light of day. Then it found Martha, standing watchful and wary. Finally, it returned to Eliza. "Who are you?" She swallowed. Eliza Hartwell. "I found you there. You were injured." He kept staring, but not quite seeing her, searching perhaps for a memory hidden behind her face. "And you?" Her voice trembled. "What is your name?" He hesitated. The effort to recall was visible in the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of pain behind his eyes. "My name?" He looked at her with genuine confusion. I can't remember," Martha gasped softly. Eliza felt her stomach drop. "You don't remember?" she whispered. "Anything?" "Nothing." His voice broke, thick with despair. "I don't know my name. I don't know where I'm from. I don't know who I am." And in that moment, Eliza understood. He had lost his memory. The silver locket gleamed faintly on the bedside table as the light outside began to fade. And for the first time since she had found him, Eliza felt fear. Not fear of him, but fear of what he might be. Chapter 2. Fragments. He woke with the taste of iron on his tongue. The pain in his head was so sharp he had to bite his lip to stop a groan from escaping. Each heartbeat struck like a hammer inside his skull. The first thing he saw was the ceiling. Dark wooden beams, scarred with age, a small spiderweb trembling in the corner. He didn't recognize it. He didn't recognize anything. Not the scent of dried herbs hanging by the window, nor the soft creak of wind against the shutters, nor the woman. She sat nearby, sewing with swift, precise movements. She didn't look at him, but somehow he knew she was aware he was awake. Her shoulders had tensed ever so slightly. He tried to sit up. Pain flared behind his eyes, and his hand flew to his forehead. He felt the rough fabric of a bandage. The woman dropped her needlework at once and came closer, pressing a steady, gentle hand against his shoulder. "Slowly," she said. "You took a heavy blow to the head, the wound still bleeding beneath the dressing." Her voice was calm, practical, free of pity. He liked that. "How long have I been here?" he asked, his voice hoarse and dry. 2 days. You were unconscious most of the time. Feverish the first night. I didn't think you'd live." Really looked at her. Her face was unadorned yet striking. Dark eyes that seemed to hold questions she'd never ask aloud. Brown hair pulled into a loose knot, a few rebellious strands falling across her forehead. A faded work dress, calloused hands. Not noble, not of the court, And yet there was something about her that held his gaze. "Why did you bring me here?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, just for a breath, but long enough for him to sense that the answer was not simple. "Because you were still breathing," she said at last. "And I couldn't let you die." "Even without knowing who I am?" "Yes, even then." Silence. He looked down at his hands. The old scars along his knuckles meant nothing to him. Neither did the way his muscles flexed beneath the skin when he closed his fist. Nothing felt familiar. Nothing felt his. "I tried," he murmured. "Tried to remember. But it's as if there's nothing, only fragments. Images that don't belong together." She pulled a chair closer, sitting beside the bed, her expression steady. "What kind of images?" He closed his eyes, searching. The pain throbbed in waves, but he pushed through it. A white horse. A sealed letter. Someone calling my name, but I can't hear the name. Just the tone, urgent, afraid. He paused. Indie music. Someone was singing in French. Her eyes widened slightly. "French? You understand French?" He blinked, confused. I don't know," she hesitated, watching him carefully. "When you had the fever, you spoke some words in that language. Perfectly. As if you'd known them all your life." He frowned, the effort stirring another wave of pain. French. The syllables felt familiar yet distant, like a melody half forgotten. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe you were a spy. Or a translator. Something that required both tongues. Spy." The word echoed in his head, and something stirred deep within, a shadow taking shape, only to dissolve before he could reach it. Eliza rose, walked to the table, and returned holding a small silver locket. "I found this," she said, offering it to him. "You were clutching it when I found you, as if it mattered more than your own life." He took it. The moment the metal touched his skin, a jolt ran through him. Not pain, but recognition. He opened it with trembling fingers. Empty. No portrait. No lock of hair. Only an engraved crest inside. The crowned lion, the sword, the rose. Yet the hollow ache that washed over him was so fierce, he had to close his eyes. Why does this feel so important? "The crest," Eliza said quietly, studying him. "It's noble. I don't know from which family, but whoever carried this belonged to the aristocracy. Perhaps even royalty." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Me? Aristocracy?" "Your hands say yes. And your voice." She crossed her arms, examining him openly now. "You may not remember who you are, but your body remembers. The way you sit, the way you hold things. It's refined. Refined." The word felt wrong. He didn't feel refined, only fractured, hollow. But as he looked at his hands again, he saw what she meant. There was discipline there, training. Something learned through years, not birth. "You fought," Eliza said suddenly. "Old scars on your arms, your hands. And when you first woke, you looked around like a soldier, searching for danger." He stared at her, surprised by her keen observation. "You notice a great many things." "I've learned it's safer that way." The door opened. A woman older than Eliza entered, carrying a tray of steaming soup. Her gray hair was twisted into a severe bun, her apron spotless, her eyes sharp. "So he's awake," she said briskly, setting the tray down. "Martha, housekeeper of this home. And apparently the reason I haven't slept for 2 nights." He blinked, caught off guard by her tone. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me." "Apologize to Miss Eliza, who crossed a war-torn border searching for her brother and came back with you instead." Martha folded her arms. "I do hope you're worth the trouble." "Martha," Eliza murmured in quiet reproach. "I'm only stating facts, miss." The woman turned to him again. "Now eat this soup. You're far too weak to be stubborn." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. And strangely, he obeyed. Another silence settled. Softer this time. Not uneasy, almost curious. "Miss Hartwell," he said, pronouncing her name slowly, as though it were something rare. "Thank you for saving me." She looked away, as if gratitude made her uneasy. "Don't thank me yet. Head wounds can be treacherous. You might still get worse. But there was something at the corner of her lips, almost a smile. Small, restrained, but real. And for the first time since waking in that strange room, he felt something other than emptiness. He felt hope. Chapter 3. Between guilt and care. Eliza hadn't slept a single hour. She sat by the hearth, her body still, her thoughts anything but. The flames had burned low, painting the room in shades of gold and ash. Across from her, the man she had found 3 nights ago lay beneath a wool blanket, chest rising and falling in slow, uneven rhythm. Every breath he took seemed borrowed from the edge of the impossible. She waited for each one, counted them, feared the moment they might stop. Martha had come earlier with hot tea and an extra blanket, but she hadn't tried to send Eliza to bed. She knew that look, had seen it once before, in Eliza's mother's eyes when her father was dying. Worry that no comfort could ease, but what kept Eliza awake wasn't only fear, it was guilt. 3 days had passed since she'd found the stranger, and she still hadn't resumed the search for Daniel. Every morning she promised herself she would leave at dawn, that she'd scour the fields again, search the nearby villages, ask among the wounded camps for any trace of her brother, and every morning she stayed. Because every time she looked at the man lying there, pale and bandaged, she couldn't make herself walk away. Just one more day, she told herself. Just until he's stronger, but he was stronger now. And she was still there. Eliza pressed her fingertips to her temples, eyes closed in exhaustion. What am I doing? Daniel needed her. Daniel, who had given up his own dreams to keep their home alive, to give her safety and a roof that didn't leak. And she was here, caring for a man whose name she didn't even know. You should sleep. The voice startled her. He was awake, turned slightly toward her, the glow of the fire flickering across his face. His skin was still pale, but his eyes, those startling blue eyes, were clear now, sharp, alive. I was about to change your bandage, she said quickly, straightening in her chair. It can wait until morning. The fever could come back. And if you faint from exhaustion, that won't help either. His tone wasn't harsh, simply firm. The kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. Still, Eliza rose, carrying the basin of clean water closer. He didn't argue. He simply turned onto his side, letting her work. She untied the bandage carefully. The wound above his left temple had stopped bleeding, but the skin around it was bruised and swollen. She dabbed the area with the damp cloth, moving slowly, her touch light. I'm sorry, she murmured. Don't be. You're saving me. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't empty. She could feel the heat radiating from him, could hear the subtle shift of his breath, the faint rasp of fabric when he moved. There was something unsettling about being that close, a pull she didn't understand and didn't dare name. May I ask you something? His voice was quiet, uncertain. You may. Why do you live here? Alone, I mean. No family nearby. Her hand froze for a heartbeat. My parents are gone, she said softly. My brother left for the war. Martha and Thomas helped keep the estate running, but it isn't the same. And you stayed. Someone had to. This land was my parents' life. I couldn't let it die. He turned his head slightly, enough to glimpse her face in the firelight. But you weren't here when you found me. You were looking for something, she swallowed. Someone. My brother. He disappeared during the battle. A long silence followed. Heavy, full. And you brought me here instead of continuing to search. It wasn't a question. Eliza finished tying the fresh bandage, rinsed her hands, and didn't look at him. I'm sorry, he said at last. For being the reason you stopped looking. You're not to blame. No, he murmured. But I am sorry all the same. Eliza sank back into the chair, fingers twisting together in her lap. The guilt pressed tighter around her chest. Tomorrow, she said quietly. Tomorrow I'll go. Once you're strong enough to stay with Martha for a few hours, I'll search again. Promise? She lifted her gaze, startled by the intensity in his tone. I promise, he nodded slowly. Something crossed his face. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. Your brother's a lucky man, he whispered. To have someone who cares that deeply. Daniel would do the same for me. I believe that, he said. I see it in you. Their eyes met, and for a moment the silence changed. It wasn't guilt or fear anymore. It was warmth. Quiet, dangerous warmth that reached places the fire could not. Do you have family? She asked suddenly. Anyone who might be searching for you? He closed his eyes, brow furrowing as though reaching for something far away. I don't know. But I think so. I don't feel as though someone is waiting for me. But I believe there must be. Maybe a brother. Or a sister. I can't be certain. Your memory will return, she said, her voice gentle. Martha says head injuries take time. And if it doesn't? The question lingered in the air. Eliza hesitated, then gave the only answer she could. Then we'll find out who you are another way. He opened his eyes again, and something in them made her chest tighten. And if I don't want to be who I was? Before she could reply, footsteps echoed in the hall. Martha appeared at the doorway, a candle trembling slightly in her hand. Miss Eliza, you need sleep, she said firmly. I'll sit with him tonight. Martha, That wasn't a suggestion. The older woman stepped inside. You'll search for your brother tomorrow, and I won't have you leaving this house half dead with exhaustion. Eliza hesitated, glancing toward the man in bed. He gave a faint nod, telling her it was all right. Very well, she said at last, rising. But before she left, she turned once more toward him. Good night. Good night. Eliza. It was the way he said her name. Low, steady, almost tender. That caught her off guard. And as she stepped into the dim hallway, she understood something she hadn't dared to admit until now. She didn't want him to remember, because when he did, he'd have to leave. And deep down, she already knew. She didn't want him to go. Chapter 4. Simple Things. He woke to the scent of bread, not the kind of fine, white bread his bones somehow remembered, soft and sweet, served on porcelain plates, but something humbler. Dense, rustic, with that faintly burnt edge that spoke of hearth fire and calloused hands. It smelled real, and it made his stomach twist with hunger. He opened his eyes and lay still for a moment, watching the morning light spill through the narrow window. The pain in his head had faded to a dull ache, still there, but bearable now. Slowly, he pushed himself up, testing the strength in his arms. No dizziness, no nausea, progress. He stood carefully, steadying himself against the back of a chair. His legs were weak, but they held. Step by step, he followed the scent of bread. The hallway was short, its stone floor cool beneath his bare feet. At the end, the house opened into a modest main room, simple but warm. A solid oak table at the center, shelves of neatly arranged crockery, a small hearth where the fire still burned, and near it, Eliza. She stood with her back to him, pulling something from the small brick oven. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, but stray curls framed her face as she worked. Flour dusted her cheek, her hands, the front of her faded apron, and she was humming, quietly, without realizing it, a light, gentle tune that danced through the room. For reasons he couldn't explain, it made him smile. Good morning, he said, leaning lightly against the doorframe. She spun around so fast the loaf nearly slipped from her hands. You're standing! Her voice carried something between surprise and relief. You should have called me. You could have fallen. I'm fine, he said, taking another cautious step. My head still aches, but I can walk. She set the bread down quickly and crossed to him, pressing her palm against his forehead as if checking the temperature of a child. No fever. She nodded, though her expression stayed tight with worry. But you shouldn't push yourself. Sit. I'll bring you water. He obeyed. Sitting at the table felt like an accomplishment. The short walk had left him breathless, but for the first time in days, he felt alive. Capable. Eliza returned with a cup of cool water and a thick slice of warm bread spread with butter. "Eat slowly," she instructed, taking her own seat with another piece. He took a bite. It was simple, imperfect, and perfect because of it. "You bake every day?" he asked. "Martha usually does," Eliza said, shrugging. "But she's gone to the village for herbs. I managed well enough." He watched her as she ate. There was purpose in every movement, quiet precision, nothing wasted. She carried herself like someone who had learned to survive with dignity, to build steadiness out of loss. And still, she had chosen to save him. "May I ask you something?" he said. "You may." He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "Why stay here? Alone after your brother left. So far from everything." Eliza tore off a small piece of bread, thoughtful. "Because this land is ours. Daniel's and mine. It belonged to our parents. And there's nowhere else that makes more sense than here. But you're young. You could marry?" She gave a humorless laugh. "And to whom?" "I have no great dowry, no important name. And I've no wish to marry someone just to earn a roof." Her bluntness caught him off guard. "You don't want to marry?" "I didn't say that." She lifted a shoulder. "I just don't want to marry out of need. If I ever do, it'll be because I find someone who sees me as more than a mouth to feed or hands to work. Someone who sees me." The words struck something inside him, a hollow place that suddenly ached. He didn't know why, but he recognized that pain. Perhaps once, in another life he couldn't recall, he too had been valued only for what he could provide, not for who he was. "You're strong," he said quietly, not as flattery, but as fact. She looked at him, half skeptical. "I'm not strong, just stubborn." "Same thing?" "Sometimes." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips, small, fleeting, but enough to light her face in a way that caught him completely off guard. They ate in silence for a while, not awkward, not heavy. Simply easy, as if they no longer needed words to fill the space between them. The door opened. Thomas stepped in, carrying a bundle of firewood. He froze when he saw the stranger sitting upright at the table. "Sir, you're up." His voice was full of genuine relief. "Thomas," he said with a nod. "Leave the wood there, Thomas," Eliza instructed. "Then check the stables. Martha should be back soon." "Yes, Miss Eliza," the boy obeyed, grinning at the man before disappearing outside. Eliza exhaled softly. "He's a good lad. Been here since he was small." "Loyal," he said. "Yes, everyone here is." She looked at him, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "You must have loyal people waiting for you too. Somewhere." The question hung between them. He had no answer. Eliza rose and crossed to a narrow shelf near the window, picking up a worn book. "I can read," she said suddenly, almost defensive. "My father taught me. Not perfectly, but enough." "Why tell me that?" "Because you speak like an educated man, and I don't want you to think I'm ignorant." Something tightened in his chest. "I would never think that." She studied his face for a lie, and found none. "This one was my mother's," she said, holding the book out. "Poetry. I don't understand half of it, but I like to read it anyway." He reached for it carefully. The pages were yellowed, corners softened by time. Ink smudges, faint fingerprints, and in one margin, a handwritten note, for Mary, who always saw beauty where others saw none. Your mother?" he asked gently. Eliza nodded. "Mary, my father used to call her that. She died when I was 17. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He closed the book and returned it to her. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, they shared something quiet and deep. Not words, but understanding. "You've lost someone too," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "I don't know," he admitted. "But yes, I think so. I miss something. Or someone. But I don't know who." "Maybe that's better," she said after a pause. "Sometimes forgetting is easier than carrying the weight." "You believe that?" "No," a small sad smile. "But I wish I did." He laughed softly. the sound rusty, unfamiliar, but real. It was the first time he had laughed since waking in that house. Eliza stood and walked to the door. She opened it, letting in a cool breeze and the scent of wet earth and wildflowers. She lingered there for a moment, staring out over the rolling fields. "I'm going tomorrow," she said without turning. "To look for my brother. Martha will stay here. Will you be all right without me for a few hours?" "I will. There's bread, water. Martha will see to everything. Just rest." "Eliza," she turned. "Thank you. For everything, and I hope you find him." Her eyes glimmered faintly, but she only nodded, and as he watched her framed in the soft morning light, something inside him shifted, quiet, terrifying, undeniable. He didn't want her to go, not because he needed care, but because somehow her presence made him feel less lost, and that, more than any memory, felt important. Chapter 5. Almost. Eliza returned at sunset, tired, mud-stained, and hollow. 3 villages, 2 refugee camps, dozens of unfamiliar faces, each softening with pity when she asked the same question. "Have you seen a man named Daniel Hartwell?" No one had. Only the same quiet refrain, "I'm sorry, miss. I don't know him." Voices drifted from the main room, Martha's and his. Eliza followed the sound and stopped in the doorway. He was standing, not leaning, not struggling to balance, standing near the hearth, adding wood to the fire. Martha sat at the table peeling potatoes, her sharp eyes never leaving him. "Careful, sir," the housekeeper warned. "You don't throw 3 logs at once. The fire needs to breathe." "Yes, Mrs. Martha," he replied, and there was a hint of amusement in his tone. His face was still pale, but his movements were surer now, more alive. When he saw her, he turned too quickly and staggered slightly. Martha jumped to her feet, but he raised a hand. "I'm fine, just turned too fast. Miss Eliza!" Martha rushed over, eyes widening. "Merciful heavens, you're bleeding!" Eliza blinked, confused, until she followed the woman's gaze. Her right hand was bleeding, not heavily but enough to stain the sleeve of her dress. She must have cut it climbing a broken fence earlier. She hadn't even noticed. "It's nothing," she murmured. "Just a scratch." "A scratch." Martha crossed her arms. "You'll sit in that kitchen and let me see to it. Now." "Martha, I'm fine." "Sit." The command didn't come from Martha this time. It came from him. Firm, steady, unmistakable. Eliza hesitated, wanting to argue, but her legs ached too much to keep standing. She sat. He crossed the room, slow but purposeful, while Martha fetched a basin of clean water and cloths. "I'll take care of it," he said to the housekeeper when she returned. Martha glanced between them, something unreadable flickering in her eyes, then nodded. "Very well. I'll make something hot for Miss Eliza to eat." Her tone softened only slightly. "And you, sir, will sit the moment you're done. You've done enough for one day." When she left, the silence she left behind felt heavier. He pulled a chair close and sat across from Eliza. "Give me your hand." She hesitated. "I can do it myself. I know. But let me repay the kindness. Please." There was something in his voice, gentle but steady, as if he needed this as much as she did. Eliza extended her hand. He took it carefully, turning her palm upward to examine the wound. His fingers were warm, firm, unexpectedly gentle. He dipped the cloth in water and began to clean away the blood in slow, precise motions. Eliza studied his face while he worked, the concentration, the faint furrow of his brow, the set of his jaw. There was something profoundly comforting about being cared for, about not needing to be strong for once. "You didn't find him," he said quietly, without looking up. It wasn't a question. "No." "But you haven't given up." "Never." He finally looked at her then, and under the golden light of the fire, his eyes looked impossibly blue, deep, searching, alive. "I know," he said softly. "You're not the kind who gives up." His hand moved slowly across her wrist now, wiping the last traces of blood, but he didn't let go. His touch lingered, steady and warm. Eliza should have pulled away. She didn't. "You're getting stronger," she said, her voice rougher than she meant it to be. "Because of you. And Martha's tyranny." That earned the faintest curve of her lips. Almost a smile. "You're strong yourself. You would have survived anyway. Not alone." Silence. The kind that hums with things that shouldn't be spoken. He still held her hand. "And she still let him. I need to know," Eliza said, suddenly breaking the quiet. "When you remember who you are, will you leave?" He blinked, startled by the bluntness of it. Because you will remember one day. And when you do, you'll discover there's a life waiting for you. A family, maybe even—" She swallowed. "A wife." The last word nearly broke. His brow creased. Not with recognition, but discomfort. "I don't know if I have one. I don't feel like I do." "But you don't know that you don't. Truth. Painful, unshakable truth." He finally released her hand, though he didn't move away. He sat close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the faint scent of smoke and soap. Something that already felt like him. "If I do have a life waiting," he said slowly, "am I sure I want to return to it?" Her heart twisted. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "Because there are people who love you. People searching for you. And it would be cruel." She drew a breath, steadying herself. "Cruel to stay here just because you can't remember them. And what if staying isn't because I can't remember?" His voice dropped, quiet, dangerous. "What if it's because of something else?" Their eyes met, and Eliza saw it. What he didn't say. What neither of them dared to name. The air changed, thickened. She should have stood up. Should have created distance, reminded herself that he was a stranger. That he wasn't hers. That he could never be. But she couldn't move. His hand rose slowly, almost uncertainly, until his fingers brushed her cheek. A light, reverent touch, as though he were afraid she might disappear. "Eliza." Her name, spoken like a prayer, like a confession, and in that moment she knew. She was falling for him, for a man without a name. Without a past. Without a future that could ever include her, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. Eliza drew back abruptly, standing so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "I should help Martha." He stayed seated, watching her with something in his eyes that looked too much like pain. "Eliza, No!" She raised a trembling hand, cutting him off. "Don't say it, please. Because if he said it, if he named what was happening, she would no longer be able to pretend, and pretending was the only thing keeping her whole." Chapter 6. The Lining of the Coat. He didn't sleep. He lay awake in Daniel's room. In the silent darkness, listening to the faint sounds of the house, the groan of wood, the wind rattling the shutters, and something that might have been light footsteps in the hallway. Eliza perhaps checking if he was all right, or simply as restless as he was. He knew she was on the other side of that door. So close, so unreachable. What had almost happened between them could not happen. He was no one, a ghost, a man without a name, without a past, with nothing to offer but broken memories and a silver locket that belonged to another life. But the worst part was that he wanted it to happen. He wanted to touch her face again. He wanted to hear his name on her lips, even if he didn't yet know what that name was. He wanted to stay in that simple, honest little house forever, pretending there was no world beyond it waiting to claim him back. And that terrified him more than the amnesia itself. When dawn came, he rose quietly and left the room before she woke. He walked through the hallway in silence, avoiding the boards that creaked, and slipped out the back door. The morning air was cold and damp. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a storm. He walked to the far edge of the property, testing his strength, feeling it slowly return to his body. That was when he saw it. His coat, the navy blue one he'd worn when Eliza found him. It lay folded on a small table, still dirty, waiting to be washed. He walked closer and touched it. The fabric was stiff with dried mud and faint stains of blood. Then he noticed something, a thick fold in the lining, as if a hidden pocket had been sewn there. His fingers trembled as he explored the fabric. Yes, something was inside. Carefully, he found the small opening and pulled it out. An envelope, sealed with red wax, but the seal had been broken, torn in haste. He unfolded the yellowed paper and read, Ainsworth. The information you carry is vital to the crown. The traitor will be exposed at Lady Rutherford's ball. Your presence is imperative. If you fail, England loses more than an agent. It loses the war. Destroy this letter after reading. Wee Ainsworth. The name echoed in his mind like a distant bell. Not empty. Not foreign. Familiar. Ainsworth. He closed his eyes and images came. Fragmented, violent, painful. A ballroom. Crystal chandeliers. Women in dazzling gowns. Men in dark coats. And himself, dressed with elegance that now seemed absurd, greeting a gray-haired lord. Your Grace. An honor, Your Grace. Duke. The next memory struck like a blade. A private room. Locked doors, maps scattered across a large table. A man in uniform pointing to positions with urgency. Ainsworth, we need you to infiltrate the French lines. You're the only one with the right contacts. No one can know. Officially, you'll be at your northern estates. Spy. He was a secret agent of the crown, a duke who served in the shadows. Then came the last image, the most painful of all. A beautiful blonde woman, eyes as cold as green glass. Her hand rested over his, her painted lips forming a flawless smile. When this tedious war ends, our marriage will finally be announced. We've been engaged since your father was alive. It's time we married. We'll be the most admired couple in London. An arranged marriage. He fell to his knees in the wet grass, the letter crumpling in his fist. He had a life, a title, obligations, a fiancée he did not love, and he had betrayed all of it by allowing himself to feel what he was starting to feel for the woman who had saved him. What are you doing out here? Her voice made him turn too fast. Pain shot through his head. Eliza stood only a few steps away, a shawl around her shoulders, eyes full of worry. When she saw the paper in his hand, she stopped. What's that? He stood slowly, hiding the letter behind his back by instinct. Nothing. Just something that was in the coat. Her eyes narrowed. You're lying. I'm not. You are. She stepped forward. Your eyes give you away. What did you find? He stepped back. Eliza, please. You remembered. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. You remembered who you are. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Not everything, he said at last, voice hoarse. But yes, some things. She stood still, looking at him as if seeing him for the first time. Or for the last. And? Who are you? He hesitated. Every part of him screamed to lie, to say he didn't know, to postpone the inevitable. But she deserved the truth. The letter says my name is Ainsworth. Was a duke, and a secret agent of the crown. The words fell between them like stones dropped into still water. Eliza didn't move, didn't speak. A duke, she repeated at last, her voice flat. And a spy. Yes, no one knew. It was secret. How long have you known? I just remembered, now, from this letter. The letter you're hiding from me? Guilt burned through him. Eliza took a step back. You have a life waiting for you. A title. Duties. She paused, her breath unsteady. Do you have a family? A younger brother. A wife? The word hung between them like a blade. A fiancé. Arranged. I didn't choose her. I never loved her. Eliza laughed softly. A sound without joy. Of course. Dukes don't choose. They obey. Eliza, no. She raised a hand. Don't say my name like that. Not now. I never wanted this to be how it ends. But it is. Her eyes glimmered, but no tears fell. You are a duke. I am no one. And whatever was happening between us can't happen. I don't care about the title, but you should. She turned away. Because people like me don't belong in the world of people like you. He followed, desperate. Eliza, wait. But she walked inside and closed the door, and for the first time since waking in that house, he felt completely alone. Rain began to fall, softly at first, then in relentless sheets. He stood there, the letter crushed in his hand, feeling the weight of his own name like chains tightening around him. Ainsworth, Duke, spy, anything but the man he wanted to be. Chapter 7. The Farewell. Eliza didn't leave her room all day. She sat by the narrow window, watching the rain turn the world outside into a blurred wash of green and brown. From the hallway, she heard his footsteps, hesitant, uncertain. As if he wanted to come in but lacked the courage. Well, she didn't have the courage to face him either, because she knew what she would see if she did. She would see in his eyes that everything had changed, that the nameless man she had saved was gone, and in his place stood a duke, bound to duties, to a fiancé, to a world that was never meant for her, and she did not belong to that world. She never would. Night fell, and the rain finally ceased. Eliza heard the front door open and close. Footsteps retreating. She rushed to the window. He was leaving, walking down the muddy road, not once looking back, the torn navy coat clinging to his shoulders, boots that perhaps Thomas had given him. He carried nothing else, and something inside her broke. Not because he was leaving, she had known he must, but because of how he left, quietly, without goodbye, as if everything they had lived through wasn't even worth a farewell. Eliza grabbed her shawl and ran to Daniel's room, flinging open the drawer of the old dresser with trembling hands. Inside was the small leather pouch that held her brother's savings, coins meant for emergencies. Daniel would understand. For this he would. She took the pouch and ran. "Wait!" He stopped. Didn't turn immediately, just stood there in the road, bathed in the silvery light of the moon breaking through the clouds. She ran to him, bare feet sinking in the mud, the shawl sliding off her shoulders. "You were going to leave." Without saying anything, he turned slowly, and the look on his face tore her in half. Pain, guilt, desperation. I didn't know what to say. What about the truth? Her voice rose sharper than she intended. Something like, "Thank you for saving my life, Eliza, but now I have to return to the world where you don't exist?" "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" "Silence." The moonlight silvered the wet earth, turning every drop clinging to the branches into false diamonds. "I don't want to leave," he said finally, his voice breaking. "But I must." "Why?" "Because you're a duke? Because of a fiancé you never chose? Because I have responsibilities. Information that must reach the crown. A mission unfinished." He took a step closer. "And because every moment I stay here, it becomes harder to go." "Then don't go." "Eliza." "Don't go." She knew it was madness, knew she was asking for the impossible, but she couldn't stop. "Stay, forget the title. Forget the fiancé. Forget everything and stay." "You know I can't." "Why? Because the world expects you to be someone you don't want to be?" "Because I have duty. Because men died to get this message through. Because if I don't return, more will die." The truth in his words struck like iron. Tears filled Eliza's eyes and finally spilled. "Then go. Fulfill your duty. Save England. Marry your fiancé and live your grand life." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "But don't pretend it meant nothing. Don't pretend it was easy." It was never easy. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth even in the chill of the night. "From the moment I woke and saw your face, nothing has been easy. Then why are you leaving?" He shut his eyes as if the next words hurt. "Because when I look at you, I feel something I've never felt before. Something that frightens me. Something that makes me want to forget who I am, what I owe, everything." His voice trembled, and I can't name it. I don't have the right to name it. But it's real, and that's exactly why I have to go. The words fell between them like distant thunder. Eliza stopped breathing. "That doesn't make sense." It does. He cupped her face in both hands, holding her as if she were the most fragile, precious thing in existence. Because if I stay, I'll drag you into scandal. Ruin your name. Make your life impossible. And I can't do that to someone He swallowed. Someone I care for more than I should. I don't care about reputation. But I do. And I care about you. She caught his wrists, keeping his hands pressed to her cheeks. So what then? You leave. You return to London? You marry. And I stay here pretending none of this happened? No. His voice was raw. You keep searching for your brother. You live. You find someone who can give you what I can't. And if I don't want anyone else? Her words trembled. I never needed anyone until you. And now, she couldn't finish. The truth was too big. And then he kissed her. Not gently, not with restraint, but with desperation. With everything they weren't allowed to have and still couldn't stop wanting. Eliza sank into that kiss as if drowning. His hands tangled in her hair. Hers gripped his coat. The world vanished, leaving only that impossible truth. That doomed love. That stolen moment. When they finally parted, both were breathless. You woke something in me I didn't know existed, she whispered, voice breaking. I don't know your whole story. I don't know how this ends. I don't even know your name for certain. And that terrifies me. Tristan, he said softly, resting his forehead against hers. My name is Tristan. Tristan. She repeated it slowly, tasting it, and despite the tears, smiled. At last, I have a name to keep. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they glistened. Promise me something. What? That you'll be happy. That you'll find your brother. That you'll live, Eliza. Truly live. Only if you promise the same. He didn't answer, because both knew it would be a lie. There would be no happiness, not after this. Eliza took the small leather pouch and placed it in his hands. Take it. It's Daniel's savings. It isn't much, but enough to reach London. Eliza, I can't. You can. She closed his fingers around the pouch. You must, and Daniel would understand. He looked from the pouch to her, something breaking quietly in his expression. Eliza, you'll stay in my heart forever. His voice wavered, then steadied as he reached into his coat pocket and drew out the silver locket. I remembered, he said, opening it carefully. It belonged to my mother. She wore it every day, until the end. But I think you should have it. No, I can't. She touched his face one last time, a gesture light and trembling. It's precious to you. He held her hand and smiled faintly, sadly. Exactly. What's precious should be kept by the one who gave it meaning again. He placed the locket in her palm, closing her fingers around it. This locket saved me once, but it was you who truly did. So it belongs to you now. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply stood there beneath the pale moonlight, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. Then he kissed her. One last time, gentler now, almost reverent. The kind of kiss given to something, or someone, you know you'll never have again. Then he stepped back and walked away. Without looking back, Eliza stood motionless in the muddy road, silver moonlight on her hair, watching him disappear into the dark. And when he was finally gone, she fell to her knees in the wet earth and wept. For the first time since burying her parents, since Daniel's departure, since life had turned into mere survival, she let the pain escape, because loving someone and letting them go was the hardest thing she had ever done. Chapter 8. The Revelation. London smelled different. Tristan crossed the muddy streets of the capital with his hood pulled low, avoiding curious eyes. 4 weeks had passed since Waterloo. 4 weeks since he'd been declared dead. The memories had returned completely during the journey. Each step that took him farther from Eliza brought back fragments of the life he had forgotten, and now wished he hadn't. Tristan Ainsworth. Duke of Ainsworth. 30 years old. Spy for the crown. Infiltrated behind French lines for the last 2 years. declared dead in battle. A complete scandal. His younger brother, Robert, had inherited the title 3 weeks ago. In a newspaper he'd found at an inn, he had read that Lady Caroline Rutherford, his former fiancée, had already been seen in public with another suitor, a certain Earl of Suffolk. The article noted her short mourning period and her swift return to society, as if grief were something one could schedule. He should have felt something. Anger, betrayal, loss. But all he felt was relief. He turned down a narrow alley leading to the Crown's hidden offices, a place known only to agents. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. The door opened. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a scar down his left cheek stared at him in shock. My God, Ainsworth? Still alive, apparently. The man pulled him inside quickly, locking the door. We thought you died at Waterloo. Your body was never found. The Crown already declared me dead. I know. Tristan drew a folded letter from his coat and handed it over. But before I died, I finished the mission, the man read, eyes widening with each line. The traitor was Rutherford. Lord Rutherford. Yes, he sold information to the French. Tristan crossed his arms. Before the battle, I intercepted his correspondence with French officers. The letters are hidden somewhere safe, and I'll reveal where only after we have an agreement. The man frowned. An agreement? Yes, because this doesn't come for free. A heavy silence. Ainsworth, the Crown expects. The Crown owes me. Tristan's voice was low, steady. I spent 2 years in enemy territory. I almost died. I was declared dead. And now I bring you the name of the man who cost hundreds of English lives. So yes, we're going to make a deal. The man sighed, then nodded. What do you want? First, the evidence against Rutherford. It's buried near Brussels. I'll give you the exact coordinates. You recover it, arrest the traitor, and save what's left of the Crown's reputation. And second, I want to stay dead, officially. The title remains with my brother Robert. The man blinked, startled. But what about your fiancé? I no longer have one. Nor a title. I'm dead, remember? Tristan leaned forward. And I intend to remain that way. But you're a duke. You have duties, a lineage. That my brother will honor far better than I ever could. Robert's always been the capable one. He kept the estates running while I was away. He deserves the title. I don't want it anymore. The man studied him, slowly understanding. There's a woman, isn't there? Tristan didn't answer. He didn't need to. And the third request? The man asked wearily. Because there's always a third. I want you to find someone. Daniel Hartwell. A soldier missing at Waterloo? Use every resource you have. Hospitals, camps, prisoner lists. Find him. And if he's dead, then tell me where he's buried. But find him. The man sighed again but took out a quill and paper. Fine. In exchange for the evidence against Rutherford, the Crown accepts your terms. You remain officially dead, and we'll locate the soldier. Coordinates for the proof, Tristan said. 3 miles south of Waterloo, near the abandoned church of Saint-Michel. Buried beneath the 4th grave to the left of the gate. The man scribbled it down quickly. And what will you do now, Ainsworth? Or should I say, ex-Ainsworth? For the first time in weeks, Tristan smiled. Live. The 10 days after Tristan's departure were the longest of Eliza's life. She rose before dawn, as always, but the days felt hollow. Martha tried to keep her busy. There was bread to bake, laundry to wash, a garden to tend. But Eliza moved through the motions like a ghost. At night, she sat in the chair he had once occupied, stared at the fireplace he had tended, touched the silver locket he had left behind, not forgotten, she knew, but left for her. A silent farewell. Martha never asked questions. She simply brewed tea every evening and sat beside her in quiet understanding. Once, Thomas had asked, "Will the gentleman come back?" Eliza had only shaken her head. On the 10th day, she found the letter at the door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, precise, masculine, but not his. She opened it with trembling hands. Miss Hartwell, I regret informing you in this manner, but you deserve the truth. Your brother, Daniel Hartwell, served the crown not only as a soldier, but as an informant. He carried vital intelligence regarding French movements. During the Battle of Waterloo, he was captured, but he survived. He is currently in a military hospital in Brussels, wounded but alive. The address is enclosed. Sincerely, a friend. Eliza read the letter 5 times before she could believe it. Daniel was alive. Wounded, but alive. Tears came, not of sorrow, but of relief, gratitude, hope reborn. She packed only what was necessary into a small case, hugged Martha tightly, thanked Thomas, and left at dawn. He found her near the hospital, not by chance. He had known she would come. He had made sure the letter would reach her. And when he saw her, small, determined, stepping down from the carriage, his heart stopped. Eliza, her hair hastily pinned up. The same dress she had worn the day he opened his eyes to find her there. A brown shawl around her shoulders. But her eyes shone with hope. He approached slowly, and when she saw him, she froze. Tristan? Just his name, yet it carried 1,000 questions. He faltered. I needed to be sure you'd find him. It was you. The letter. The address. I had resources, contacts. I used them to find him. She stepped closer, searching his face. You should be in London. With your brother. With your fiancé. I have no fiancé, no title. Officially, I'm still dead. But I chose Eliza. He closed the distance between them. I chose to give it all up. The dukedom, the responsibilities, the life I never wanted. I made a deal with the crown. I gave them the traitor they needed. And in return, they let me stay dead. And they found your brother. Her eyes filled with tears. You did this for me? For us. He cupped her face just as he had that rainy night. Because I realized you'd never be happy in my world, Eliza. In those gilded rooms full of empty smiles and suffocating rules. You'd wither there, and He exhaled, closing his eyes. I couldn't bear to watch that happen. So I chose your world. I'd rather be no one beside you than a duke without you. I gave up everything. The title, the estates, the life that was never truly mine, just to be a man. A man free to love you as you are. Tristan, let me stay. Let me meet your brother. Help him recover. Build a simple life with you, far from a hollow scripted one. Let me just love you. Eliza pulled him into her arms, burying her face against his chest. You're insane. Completely. And stubborn. I learned from you. She laughed through her tears. And he felt something he hadn't in years. Peace. 3 months later, the little stone house was alive again. Daniel, thin but healing, had repaired the leaky roof, mended fences, rebuilt the stable, restoring dignity to the place the war had nearly taken. And Tristan had learned to work the land, not with the grace of a nobleman, but with the resolve of a man reborn. The hands that once signed documents for the crown now tilled the soil. The shoulders that had borne a title now carried bales of hay. And he had never felt freer. Martha watched with quiet approval, and Thomas treated him not as a fallen lord, but as an equal, which, to Tristan, was worth more than any bow. It wasn't a duke's life. No balls, no servants, no titles, but there were sunsets filled with laughter, dinner shared around a worn wooden table, fingers intertwined at the end of the day. There was love, true, chosen, free. That night, as Eliza slept beside him, now his wife, after a simple ceremony in the village, Tristan looked out through the narrow window. The moon glowed over the fields they now tended together. And for the first time since awakening on that battlefield, he knew exactly who he was. Not Tristan Ainsworth, Duke, just Tristan, the man who had chosen love. Epilogue. Some mornings, Eliza still woke and reached for him, as if it had all been a dream. As if she might open her eyes to find the house empty again, Daniel gone, and a nameless stranger wounded in the next room. But then she'd feel his arm around her waist, his warmth, his slow, steady breathing against her neck, and remember. He had stayed. He had chosen to stay. Sometimes, when Tristan wasn't looking, she opened the box that held the silver locket, the crest that had once symbolized everything he'd left behind. Not with sadness, but with silent gratitude. Because that object had led them here. Because that golden world of titles and power, no matter how dazzling, would never have been complete. She had learned something she'd never understood before. Love wasn't about deserving or belonging. It was about choosing, every day, in the smallest gestures, in every look shared across the table, in every whispered promise before sleep. And she chose. Always. Tristan never regretted it. There were moments, of course, when memories haunted him, glittering halls, political power, the taste of privilege. But then he'd look at Eliza laughing with Martha in the kitchen, or at Daniel fixing the fence under the soft gold of afternoon light, and realize he had never truly had power until he gave it away. Daniel had become more than a brother-in-law. He had become a brother in every sense. Together, they rebuilt more than a home. They built a family, yet one name still echoed through quiet nights. Robert. The brother left behind, burdened with a title that was never meant to be his, believing a lie. Tristan carried that guilt like a splinter, small but deep. Sometimes he imagined Robert alone in those echoing halls, dealing with nobles who saw him as a substitute, never legitimate. And in moments of weakness, Tristan longed to appear, not to return, but to say, "Forgive me for the lie. I found something worth living for. I found Eliza," but he knew seeing Robert again would risk everything, their peace, their freedom, their love. So he kept his brother locked in memory, alongside the man he once was, and moved forward. Always forward. Perhaps one day, when time had softened the pain and his name was forgotten, he'd send a letter. Just one. So Robert would know his brother hadn't died. He had simply been reborn. That night, when the first wheat they had sown ripened golden under the moonlight, Eliza and Tristan sat by the back door, watching the wind dance across the field. "Do you remember the day you found me?" she asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "How could I forget? You saved me." "No." She twined her fingers with his. "We saved each other." And it was true. Because war had erased memories, but not what the heart had known from the first touch. Because titles could be lost, but real choices endured. Because sometimes love didn't arrive as a promise, but as redemption. Outside, the fields shimmered green under the moonlight. The house echoed with laughter, and the locket that had once symbolized Tristan's cage now rested forgotten in a box, while two hearts, finally free, beat in perfect harmony. Daniel appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Martha says dinner's ready, and if you don't come soon, it'll get cold." Tristan laughed, that light, unguarded laugh Eliza loved so much. He stood and reached out his hand to her. "Shall we?" She took his hand. She always would, because the heart, after all, never needed memory to know where it belonged. It only ever needed courage to choose.